Welcome to this week's edition of the Out of Structure podcast on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. I'm Matt Stagner here with Ron Kopp Jr. as always, taking your questions. Don't forget to continue submitting those for us. But we have plenty to talk about this week after the Chiefs fall to 8-5 after their second straight loss, the fourth loss in 6 games for this team. 20-17 against the Bills in Arrowhead. Ron, how you feeling today?
Well, I think, we've survived the storm, but this is we definitely need to let everyone, get some thoughts out, get their emotions out. Obviously, our guys Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes had to after the game. I've never seen either of them, so animated and so, expressive of the officiating right after the game in the post-game press conference. I, as someone that covers the post-game press conferences and usually looks for an angle to write about, there was only one angle to write about, and it was the officiating. I'm not gonna lie, Stags. I was pretty that was pretty embarrassing at first to kind of hear them kind of just go off and on and on and on about it. And but there's obviously a reason they were so animated, right, Stags? I don't know, but at first it was just like, wow, they're really gonna go on and on about this, huh? They're not even gonna talk about anything else. We heard Mahomes kind of kind of just say he regrets kind of being so animated after the game, because obviously the Josh Allen handshake, he mentioned something about the officiating. He had to be held back on the sidelines, but I'm glad we're past this now. We're in the eye of the storm, or maybe we're past the storm. I should say we're past the storm, Stags. But I don't know. It was just amazing to see. I mean, I could not believe how hung up they were on it.
Yeah, it was notable, and it is unusual for both of those guys to blame anything but themselves when it comes to any outcome that wasn't ideal. And it was shocking to see it happen in the middle of the game. Often you'll see the coach will go after the ref and argue. Maybe, the quarterback sometimes will throw his arms up in frustration, or he'll say something to the ref, but then they move on. I wasn't so worried about them not moving on after the game. I was more worried about how they didn't move on during the game, and the fact that they still had a chance to win this game even after that bad call. We can talk about the call in a moment, but even after that play was called back, there was still 3 plays there where they could have easily moved the ball, gotten ahead of the sticks and continued that drive and could have still ended that game on a positive note with a win. And it really seemed like the game was over at that point. And with Mahomes yelling at the refs during a timeout, when they really should be getting themselves focused on what to do, that was the part that was most concerning to me, followed closely by the Josh Allen handshake. I thought that was a really surprisingly not a great sportsman, way of doing it again. So I was less embarrassed by the whole thing and more like, whoa, if they're reacting like this, something's up. And it can only be one of two things. It can only be one, that this was an atrocious call that cost them the game literally in that situation. Or 2, this team is getting pretty frustrated with the close losses, with their lack of execution, and it boiled over. And this was more of a straw that broke the camel's back. I don't know which one of those 2 things it was. We'll never know. But it's one of those 2, and that's why it was notable more so to me than embarrassing.
No, I think I like that point because, that was my first initial thought, was that it was a pretty embarrassing thing. I even tweeted hey, they should accept all the criticism they're going to get today on Monday for the way they handled that. Then some stuff comes out in terms of Dan Orlovsky, the ESPN analyst, former NFL quarterback. He gets this all 22 a lot quicker than us local guys, and he was already on it. And I thought it was very interesting that he pointed out how Toney was lining up very similarly offsides throughout the game. 4 or 5 times leading up to that point. Maybe I stretched that to 5. I think it was at least 4 times leading up to the first, the one they called the penalty on.
Now, that could either be a point on either side of this argument, right? Because if you say, he was doing it all game and they didn't flag him, and then they flagged him in that moment, that's one thing. But if he was doing it all game and getting warned, then he was out of line on that last play. So, that could go either way, right?
But that's where the point is that Andy made it clear that they were not warned, right? And there was not communication about that. And that's where at first when I thought maybe it was just the one play, it's like, hey, if he's lined up very offsides on a play, I don't know how exactly it works, but I assume they're just going to throw the flag. And that's what Carl Sheffer said after the game is like, hey, if he's at offsides, we're going to throw the flag. But if he was lining up, similarly offsides the entire game and the officials didn't give them a warning, and the other clip that I saw on Twitter was Matt Ryan, former NFL quarterback, saying he kind of understood the gripe from Reed and Mahomes because he said they usually get warned 3 or 4 times throughout the game on stuff like that, on receivers lining up too close to the line of scrimmage, any sort of formational thing. And so, I think that's where the frustration came from both of them, is that why did they choose the one, the biggest moment of the game to make an example when it sounded like there was the potential for them to make a point before then, hey guys, Toney's lying a little bit off, close to the line of scrimmage, let's just make a warning. And so that's where I get Andy's, frustration. And that's why I was kind of like, okay, I get why he was trying to make a point. Bottom line is though, the microcosm of Toney lining too far offsides, so much so that the ref has to throw a flag, is just the lack of detail this whole receiver group's played with this year. So we can talk about that later. But I think just overall, I became to understand why Reed and Mahomes were so frustrated about the lack of communication from Carl Sheffers and his crew once again.
Yeah, it is notable also that it came from this crew, and we did have a couple questions to this effect. What's understeer calls out the other big call of the game really was that incredible play from Josh Allen where he throws the ball out of bounds with 2 guys on him, gets it to Latavius Murray, is that right? Running back.
Yes.
And clearly, at least to my eye, drops that pass.
Me too. And
they spent a bunch of time reviewing that and then came back with a conclusion that it was a catch. That was shocking. But this is a ref with some serious history with the Chiefs. And I'm not making the case for bias. I don't think that that's fair or reasonable to say that this guy just hates the Chiefs, so he tries to screw them over. I'm more making the case for incompetency personally. But if you look through the history of this guy with the Chiefs, there are some pretty famous calls in Chiefs history that were directly related to this exact same referee. 2016 postseason, the Chiefs score a touchdown and go for 2 to tie the game. It's 18-16. They're going for 2. They convert it, tie the game. Carl Sheffers flags Eric Fisher for a holding penalty, calls that one back. The Chiefs lose 18-16 in the playoffs. Travis Kelce, not one to mince words, says that it was ignorance on his part, that he should never be allowed to wear a zebra jersey again, not even working at a Foot Locker. Paraphrasing there, but that was that. I don't know if that was the beginning of this chapter with Sheffers and the Chiefs, but it went on. Super Bowl, against Tampa Bay.
Yep.
That game was always remembered for the offensive line play, but the penalties almost were worse to watch. That game was brutal when it came to penalties. The Chiefs were penalized 11 times for 120 yards. Tampa Bay 4 times for 39 yards. That was a record for the most penalties in the first half of a Super Bowl ever. And then 2022, week 5, Chris Jones gets a sack, forces a fumble, recovers the fumble, all in one motion. and gets flagged somehow for roughing the passer, for not stopping midair and not landing on the quarterback. And basically, the Arrowhead Stadium folks didn't let Sheffers off the hook for that one. There's just one thing after another. Now, the reason I'm saying it's not like he hates the Chiefs bias. One of the reasons, number one, I feel like that's a dumb conspiracy theory. Number two, in the Super Bowl this last year, the penalty against James Bradbury on Juju Smith-Schuster that a lot of Philly fans blame for their loss in the Super Bowl was also Carl Sheffers. So, it's not always, he's going against the Chiefs and the Chiefs are losing. But when it's that guy, it's more sensitive because it's happened so many times.
Well, that's the full circle thing here where it's like, oh, okay, so we're doing the same thing the Eagles fans were doing last year at the end of their, which I know it's a little different, obviously, because it's more of a, procedural thing rather than like an in the play, like, in the moment kind of flag. All that to say, I think it's cool that we let Andy and Pat get that frustration out, right? We let them, express it. They both kind of, were, Andy was like, hey, I'm not trying to make excuses, I'm just, was trying to explain, why, it was going down the way it was. So I think that's good, but people were still, were still upset with Toney. I mean, people were in the mentions, in the comments at AP, definitely upset with Toney for lining up offside, Stags. I know you heard about that.
Yeah, and I told, this is maybe the first time I've ever done this on Twitter. I said, hey, bright guy NFL Wonderkind on Twitter, we would love to know why Kadarius Toney didn't make the losers list. And I said, hey, let's talk about that this week because, as I go through and make that list every week, first of all, it's immediately post game that I'm writing those, so it's not. There's some things that are hard to tell, without a further review. And I called that out this week, even as I talked about, some of the coverage issues, the fact that the Bills running back James Cook was wide open a couple times. It's hard to attribute that to any one particular player, in the moment. But if you look at the game from Kadarius Toney, take a step back and say, production-wise, he was involved in the offense more than he has been. And in fact, this was his most productive game of the 2023 season. That's
hilarious.
First of all, not a strong testament to his season, but this was his most productive game, and his best play of the day didn't count because of penalty, right? So it had that call not happened in that way, you're talking about him scoring a touchdown on a spectacular play, having two rushes. One of them went for 14 yards, 3 catches on 4 targets, including a couple that moved.
He did drop a pass, which would have been it wasn't a kind of a crucial kind of kill the drive.
Sure.
On a second and long, would have made it 3rd and short. Ended up being 3rd and 12.
Yeah. Hey, this is not a Kadarius Toney fanboy cheerleading podcast or article at this point. I mean, this is somebody who's had a really rough season. Somebody who the Chiefs said was their number 1 wide receiver and has performed like a number 5 wide receiver all season, and at best, and that's certainly frustrating. But reading down the list of these questions, so we talked about bright guy, Panchenko in 1970. They can't keep putting Toney on the field. I mean, no way, right? And Eric H835, why hasn't Toney been cut already? It's already 9:45 a.m. I would think they would get out of bed sooner than that. It's not a good look for Mahomes and Reed to complain about the call when Toney was damn near on the defensive line. We all learned to line up when we were 8 years old. Which is praised, Eric, by the way. I appreciate your prose there. But it is, to me, a little bit probably unfair to say, this is all on Kadarius Toney. As Thomas Ramirez pointed out, what was worse, the offsides on Kadarius Toney or the offsides that they didn't call on Von Miller.
Mm-hmm.
You can go through this game and find a lot of calls that didn't go the right way or should have gone a different way. Again, coming back to this, not that it's biased, but maybe it's not the highest level of competency from the officiating. When you look at some of the false start calls, there's been some footage on Twitter this week of both Bills tackles, jumping early in the same way that they always call Jawan Taylor for every single week. So, that kind of stuff is frustrating. But again, whether you want to blame Tony, you want to blame the refs, we can't sit here and say that this was a fluke, that this was they'd have a perfect season if not 4, because they now have 5 losses.
Yeah, no, we're burying the lead we're burying is that, they are only 1 game up in the division. They are, 2 games back in the 1 seed. That's where the frustration boiled over. I mean, you mentioned the frustration boiling over with these losses, but it's because, they are just anybody now in the playoff picture. They are not.
They're not the front runner anymore. Yeah, that's for sure. And I think that does go back to your point of this is not a new issue. This is not, right. Whether he's lined up he's clearly lined up offsides in that play.
Yes.
But the drops, the penalties, the turnovers have been an issue all season. In every one of the losses, you can attribute it directly to those 3 things, and this is no exception. So, you beat your head up against the wall because the exact same thing happens every single week. And again, you get to a situation where the Chiefs have the ball and there's a couple minutes left on the clock. All they have to do is drive the field and score, and they win. And you look at the guy next to you, and do you say, oh, here we go, Chiefs are about to win this game? Or do you say, oh, God, what's going to go wrong here? And I know I had the what's going to go wrong here feeling this week when they got to that last drive. Something was going to go wrong. They were not going to score and win that game, even though they have the MVP and other pieces that should give you some confidence.
Yeah, no, I think the one thing we've talked about it before, but like these late game situations and it just being consistently untrustworthy now. One of my favorite national podcasts I listen to is Ryan Russillo, and he always says his favorite thing about one of his favorite football things is just Mahomes in the last 4 minutes of a game. Just what is he going to do? And he opened his pod this week saying, it's not, it's not fun anymore. It really isn't. Like, Mahomes has lost me. It used to be my favorite thing in football. Now it's, one of the most discouraging things in football. And it's not because of Mahomes. Like, Mahomes did not lose superpowers. Like, even if he misses passes, even if he, is timid in the pocket at times where it's like, hey, you should, read through. It's all because he is uncomfortable with who he's throwing to, and maybe who's around him as pass protectors too. But I think for the most part, the line's doing well. He had a rookie left tackle this week, and we're going to talk about him as a winner here in a second. But the last point I want to make on the blow up from Mahomes and Reed is no one better make this out to be like some, like difference from Mahomes from like, Brady did this all the time. But this is what hyper competitive athletes do. There was a clip going around of the time it was Monday Night Football. They didn't call defensive pass interference on Kuechly against Gronk in the end zone. Brady rides the ref, yelling at him, screaming at him, coming off the field, walks with him into the tunnel, and is just hollering at him with a red face. Like, this is what hyper competitive athletes do. So it's definitely not anything like anyone saying like, oh, I lost respect for Mahomes is kind of just being ridiculous in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. But we go back to this. Okay, one more thought on this game before we move on to the rest of the topics. What aspects of the game would lead you to believe that they lost this particular contest? Mahomes outplayed Josh Allen for the most part. Would you agree with or disagree with that statement?
I would agree with that statement. Yes, I would.
Statistically, it's true. In just about every category, they both had 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Mahomes averaged more yards per attempt, more yards total, higher QBR, higher rating overall.
No, you're right, 100%.
Or higher rating overall, yeah. So, fine. So Mahomes wasn't bad. That wasn't the reason they lost. They were missing Isaiah Pacheco, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire stepped in and played his best game of the season. Not that he was spectacular, but he ended up with around 70 total yards. Made some good plays. Jared McKinnon kicked in and had his best game of the season, I thought. Looked the most spry we've seen him in a bit. Between those two guys, they filled the void. The running game was passable, right?
Yeah.
For the most part. All right. Was the defense terrible in this game? Yeah. They gave up 20 points to Buffalo.
They settled in for sure.
They settled in. They had 3 sacks.
Second half was a different story for sure.
They forced a turnover, a nice interception by Jamar Connor. The second half they figured out how to get some pressure. Sure, they let James Cook a little bit more than what he should have been, but overall the defense did enough that they should have won this game. Did they make a big special teams mistake? No. Harrison Butker's still perfect on the season. And Richie James had one of his best returns of the year with a 25-yard punt return.
Yeah, that was good.
Why did they lose this game, Ron? How do you come up short at home when none of those?
One thing you didn't mention there.
Was there a position group I left out? I'm trying to count here. Sorry.
And this is where we can get into winners and losers and start with, you had the losers as, again, you didn't feature Toney, but one of them was coaches Andy Reid, Matt Nagy, and wide receivers coach Connor Embry. And at this point, I've been someone that's been kind of saying, look, hey, Embry, let's not target any, it's not his fault that the receivers are bad. At this point, anyone involved with the receivers deserves, fault, blame. And, I'm not saying some people are like, you got to fire Embry. That's what's going to change it. I don't think that's the case, but something has to change because that really was, and the theme of this game was the pass offense being abysmal again. They only completed 1 pass out of 5 throws, 20 or more yards downfield. Mahomes on non-play action dropbacks averaged only 5.4 yards per attempt. A lot of his success came on, screens, quick screens, or play action passes. Anytime it was just, all right, guys, I'm a drop back. You're going to get open. If it wasn't a quick pass, it rarely worked. And you saw that on the 3rd and 12 incompletion early to MVS. You saw that on, Rice. He threw it low to Rice in the end zone, which they scored on that drive anyway. So that was okay. And Sky on one, he threw at his feet because Sky's just drifting in the route. And Sky's a loser for you. I'm glad you pointed that out. It was his only target of the game. And he still, 2 years in, for week 14, still cannot, for whatever reason, run a crisp route where Mahomes thinks he's going to be. It is just crazy. You'd think, when it happens to Rice, I excuse it more. When it happens to Sky, it's just mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. And so, I think the real theme of this game, and you highlighted them in the losers, really was just anybody involved in the pass offense. And outside of Mahomes, because I think Mahomes did his best. He made a few really nice throws. The Rice touchdown was really great. There was just a lot of miscommunication
on 3rd and long.
That was a great play. Good play by Kelsey too, but Mahomes finding him.
Yeah, I mean it really doesn't come down to one game worth of failure to me. To me, the fact that it has not gotten any better.
Exactly.
Rashee Rice is developing, and he's doing enough to overcome any. If he has a drop every game, but he still puts up 80 yards on 10 targets, then that's 100% of success. I don't have a problem with that. If Sky Moore drops his only target of the game or misses his only target of the game, then he's not contributing anything. And it's not just Sky Moore. MVS is still exactly the same guy he's always been. It's a 50-50 shot at best if you target MVS in his career. And this year is no different, but he's lacking the big plays that make up for it. You tolerate that stuff when somebody's a playmaker. If they're not being a playmaker, and they're still making all the same mistakes that they've always made, and they're not getting better, that to me becomes a coaching issue, whether it is a lack of development of those particular players, it's a schematic thing where they're not putting them in the easiest possible position to succeed, or it's an issue where the coaches need to sit somebody on the bench and play somebody else who can be in the right spot and catch the passes thrown to them. One way or the other, this wide receiver room continues to be the same amount of a problem it has been literally since the first week of the season, and we're in week 14.
Yeah, no, it's we said it in the Eagles game. It's the same issues we're talking about that we said in week 1. So it's like
the Lions game. Obviously, week 1 was catastrophic in this regard, and it's not any different now.
So, yeah, I think to kind of round out the game discussion, the winners. Let's talk about some silver linings. You mentioned Butker. Butker stays perfect. We do get to shout out the defense. You mentioned Connor had the interception. That really was a nice play. He read Josh's eyes when he was scrambling, flew across the field. He really did cover a lot of ground. I've always said, since me and the draft guys joke that we really didn't know much about Connor when they drafted him. So we were doing the all 22 research as they were drafting him, trying to get our takes out. And the one thing I thought about him in that rushed film study was he does a lot better coming forward as a player, and that relates to pass coverage too. And coming backwards, he's got a lot of room to grow, and that's why you may not see him be put in those situations very much where he's like a free safety type. But man, if he's moving forward, if he's running towards the ball, he is a playmaker. So shout out him. Shout out Jerry Sneed for shutting down Stephon Diggs.
Absolutely.
Diggs only had 24 catches on 11 targets. That's almost 2 yards a target. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And George Karlaftis was definitely noticeable. He was the one who finished out of all the rushers, but I think the whole pass rush group. I know you had Turk and Chris Jones with some in the losers column, but I think the whole pass rush group definitely deserves some credit.
And just to be clear, there, Turk's had a rough season. I think just not a bad season, but just a very unproductive season for him, considering where expectations were. Chris Jones, I think. To me, this was a frustrating game for him because he was just like this far. This is great radio here. This far, he's very close to making a lot of plays, and wasn't able to get it done. And so I think to me, it wasn't that Chris Jones was bad. It's just that I'm sure this was a very, very frustrating game for him. George Karlaftis, on the other hand, got his 9th sack, and he had his 10th sack, but it was called back for a penalty. So this is somebody
I didn't even realize that.
He was about to crack double digits and frankly should have in this game. So,
wow. 10 sacks with 4 games to go would have been quite a statement kind of number. I know. I mean, obviously 9 sacks is very impressive still, but just kind of getting to that double digit is always kind of the mark for a good pass rusher. So.
Absolutely. All right, bring us back down before we go to break, Ron. What's your party pooper segment for this week?
Well, I do think the Chiefs defense, while they did settle in, we did see them pass rush again, I think deserves some credit. I think these last few weeks, it's starting to build up more and more. I think you're starting to see the cracks in the spine of the defense, right? That middle of the defense. And we thought the linebacker room was going to be one of the strengths this year. The safety room is obviously, something that we, thought was deep and a stronghold, but you're seeing how one injury can really make it crumble. I think for starters, though, I will start up front. The defensive tackle room, I think we're starting to see all the frustrations we had before the season about not addressing it. You just mentioned Turk Wharton. Derek Nottie is kind of resorting back to maybe the reason why we thought they needed to improve from that this offseason. Matt Dickerson is not somebody, you can consistently play on the inside. He does hustle hard. He makes plays, when he's in, and I think a lot of that is because he has the fresh legs. He's kind of getting in there while the offensive line has already, been, 3 drives in or whatever. All that to say, I think you're starting to see the cracks in that up front in the run game. Drew Tranquil being out is really exposing, the athleticism of the linebacker room, or the just kind of the awareness of the linebacker room. I think Nick Bolton had a very, very rough game. To be honest with you, Stags, I'm surprised you didn't have him in the losers column, because I think he was a big reason. You had Turk Wharton you mentioned Turk Wharton had he was kind of pushed back on that Josh Allen touchdown run. Nick Bolton had one and no part of trying to push that pile back either. And I think it was kind of maybe just some rust from his first game back. Not saying, I think he will improve.
I was giving him a little grace there for that.
Yeah, and that's fair. But I think they targeted him early. You actually saw James Cook, was being used in coverage by Gay or Bolton, and that's where he kind of got loose a few times. It was really good. I would say both play designs were good on those plays up the sideline and then the touchdown up the field. But all that to say is I do think Drew Tranquill is a huge part of this. If he is out, you're gonna see the cracks in it. But he should be back, right? So that's good. But Brian Cook, I don't know how long that is. They didn't put him on IR, but that was a nasty ankle injury he used or he went through. And man, he is known for his range right now. He can fly around the field, and if he's kind of limited in that capacity, you're seeing the cracks of Mike Edwards filling in for him. Mike Edwards is a playmaker, but an inconsistent one. And so that's where, I am a little concerned with just the spine of the defense right now. And you're seeing it over the last few weeks. It seems like injuries getting healthier probably will help the back end, but I don't see the defensive tackle room getting better unless they give Neil Farrell Jr. a chance, Keandre Coburn a chance, two bigger guys that, maybe that is one answer to this, giving those fresh legs, guys that haven't played all year, an opportunity to stuff some gaps down the stretch.
Yeah, the Chiefs are soft in the middle like lava cake or dad bods is what I'm the
headline. There you go, lava cake. I like that.
All right, let's get to your game and then hear from our sponsors. So Ron has got everybody's favorite game. What NFL player am I who's played for both the Chiefs and the Patriots this week? What do you got?
Yes, sir, Stags. You're going to have to guess who I am. I am someone that played for the Chiefs and Patriots. Played for the Patriots during the beginning of the Bill Belichick era. I was there in the beginning. Although I only made one Pro Bowl while I was playing for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Came to the Chiefs and caught 2 touchdowns in 2 years with the Chiefs. So got to guess who I am.
Before you started talking, buddy. All right, stick with us on the Out of Structure podcast. We'll be right back. We'll answer that question and the rest of your questions from Twitter. And we're back on the Out of Structure podcast. Matt Stagner here with Ron Kopp Jr., who's always trying to stump us with these, what NFL player am I? But when you said this is somebody that played for both the Chiefs and the Patriots, there's one name that came to my head, and he's since been a somewhat successful NFL head coach, and our guy Mike Vrabel, who I remember when they traded for Vrabel, by the way, thinking that they just hit the jackpot, that they got a Pro Bowl player and a starting quarterback for second-round pick.
Pat's GM coming over, Pioli, the genius.
This is going to be the next great era of Chiefs football, and it wasn't so much so.
Well, no, I'm surprised. I guess I just underestimated you, Stags. I'm just gonna be honest because I was thinking, I could do Ty Law, I could do Matt Castle, but maybe Vrabel. If I say 2 touchdowns with the Chiefs, maybe he'd just think offense too hard. But you're too good. You're too good. I underestimated.
We take our small victories where we can get them. All right, just to bring us back down, mailroom questions. Matthew Ketchum just sends a GIF that says, "Why does it hurt so much?"
It is painful, man. I mean, we're back in the slums of the AFC of the playoff race. We're not these last losses. These last few losses, it was like, all right, well, it happens. They just need to kind of get the ship right. But losing 4 or 6. I made a note of it. It was the first time Mahomes as a starting quarterback has lost 4 or 6 games. It was only the second time he's ever done it. And it was the first time since that 2021 stretch at the beginning of the year when I think we all consider that like the low point of the Mahomes era. And so maybe I'll ask you this, Stags, is this the low point of the Mahomes era? I mean, is it that much of a panic button? Because he doesn't, I mean, we don't lose 4 or 6. Again, I just mentioned it. It's only happened one other time.
I had not thought of it in that way. KS Chaser, Chasing Bad, why can't they have nice things this year? It's just mistakes and refs. I tune in to watch a crazy lateral touchdown, not for the ref to flag something. The biggest issue is that for most of the Mahomes era, they were good enough to overcome those mistakes and flags. Yeah. Last year, they made less mistakes. This year, it's mistakes galore, especially or usually at the worst times. I think to me, that's the biggest thing is they're making a lot of mistakes. They're making mistakes at very, very critical times. And, I would say the vibes are pretty low at this point from the Mahomes era standpoint. I think there's less of a belief, as I mentioned before, that when Mahomes gets the ball down 3, 2 minutes to go, is he going to win that game? Is he going to put him on his back and find a way to get that done? Or is there going to be some ridiculous mistake, different one every time, like whack-a-mole, popping up, causing a trouble that causes them to lose?
Right. Yeah. No, I do think it's just the execution is just like so noticeably worse this year that, yeah, it makes the really bad penalties moments, the holding calls, the false starts, it all just feels worse because, hey, when they get into a 1st and 15 or, 2nd and 15, it's no longer like how we used to feel about it. All right. Yeah, they got it. Right. It's Mahomes will drop back, find Kelsey 15 yards down the field or what. Nope. It's not like that right now. So any little penalty just feels like it really just sets them behind the sticks.
Yep. Drops do that too. Turnovers.
Right.
The game feels like it's over. All right. Well, let's look ahead here a little bit. Pat Machuk. If you're really, first of all, Pat Machuk, I love the optimism here. If you're really worried about the Chiefs, go be a Cowboys fan. This is the love it or leave it approach here, which I like it in this instance. The Chiefs will rally together. They'll win the next 4 weeks, get rolling, end up with a chance at the Super Bowl. How can anyone doubt? Mess around and find out. This sort of leads me a little bit into Mike's to-start. Home field advantage is probably off the table, but the remaining 4 games are extremely winnable. Will beating these 4 bad or mediocre teams tell us anything, or will it feel like fool's gold? I think the offense is what it is at this point. So, again, I like the blind optimism of Pat Machuk here to just say, hey, you can't doubt these guys. They've won 2 Super Bowls. They've been to another one. They were overtime away from being in 2 other Super Bowls. I mean, this is a championship caliber group with the best defense you've ever seen them play with. So why wouldn't they have a chance to come back, especially given a soft schedule, as Mike's to-start said?
Yeah, no, this is my thing, is I thought we would be getting this, we were saying you would be getting some fool's gold, maybe from this stretch after the Eagles game, right? Because they were playing the Eagles and the Packers. The funny thing is they lost, 2 of those games now that I thought maybe they'd be able to run the table through. We both thought the Bills game would be tough. We called that, at the and desperate energy is hard to match, right? And the Bills definitely had more desperate energy than the Chiefs. All that to say is, yeah, I do think there's a chance I would say it probably will be fool's gold the next 4 games. We just learned that Justin Herbert is not going to be available for that last game of the season for the Chargers. He is out for the season. Jake Browning, I will say, has played well for the Bengals. Their offense looks pretty good. But he hasn't played a Spags defense. I imagine, that's going to be kind of a rude awakening
and he's
for
the
Bengals.
Best quarterback remaining on their regular season schedule.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The speculation that I just saw here, Bradley Zappi, Aiden
Bailey's
O'Connell, Jake Browning, and Easton Stick. I mean,
isn't that a baseball bat? Easton Stick.
That's a good name for one. This is not a group that most of us have even heard of, much less should be afraid of when it comes to the matchups. So, yeah, I think they have every opportunity to win these last 4 games. Of course, they had an opportunity to win the last 2 weeks, but this is a team that has everything still in front of them. Is it the end of the world if they have to go play on the road in the playoffs?
Right.
Probably not.
No, no one should feel like that. We just haven't seen it, right? And it's always, especially now that there is only one team that gets that bye week, it is such an advantage over the rest of the field.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't had to experience that, at least, to win the Super Bowl, right? They missed out on the bye week in 2021. They ended up losing an AFC championship. They kind of lost steam in that second half. It's something to consider. So yeah, I do think they'll win these games, but I do think the party pooper segment, guys, really is the whole point of this question, is that, there's cracks and weaknesses, soft spots in this team that they show each week. And even if they did pull this game out, even if they did win the game against Green Bay because they called the DPI on MVS down late, and they ended up punching that in, there's still these cracks that I think are going to show up in the worst moments.
All right. Well, Brandon Plank asks, are we concerned that they might miss the playoffs altogether?
The other side of this.
It feels like the number one seed is gone. With obviously maybe the result of last night's game being a little bit of a assistance to get them towards the number one seed. If the Dolphins had that loss, which helps them at least keep that door at least cracked open.
Oh yeah. That
but
helps.
Denver has the Lions, Patriots, Chargers, and Raiders, when the Chiefs have the Patriots, Raiders, Chargers, and Bengals remaining. So pretty similar schedule here. Denver's a team that's been heating up. Could they mess around and lose the division at this point?
I mean, it would be. I mean, you're talking all time. We would be freaking out in Chiefs Kingdom if they fell that hard on their faces at the end of this season, because hey, again, we just talked about it. Buffalo was a tough team. Was a team that I think we all kind of thought maybe going into the game, especially once we saw the injury report, that they could have lost that game. But there's no excuse for losing to the Patriots this year, although their defense is playing better. And the Raiders at home on Christmas Day against Aiden O'Connell, you got to win that game. We had just talked about Chargers and Bengals. Yeah, I don't see a way that the Chiefs, drop those games, and if they do, let's all panic. But I don't see that happening.
Yeah,
I think we will see them finish strong for the regular season, and then I'll just be here waiting for the inevitable, unfortunate, being my pessimistic self.
Well, intentionally left blank here on Twitter brings up that question. What's the new acceptable expectation? Is it to win the division, make the playoffs, at least get past the first round? I mean, what do you think? What's the new not even acceptable? What's the new realistic expectation now? You've been saying all along that maybe this is not necessarily a Super Bowl season. Will you be happy if they win the division?
No, I see. That's the thing is, I'm acknowledging that I don't think it's gonna, that they're gonna finish this off. But my thing is that they still, being the defending Super Bowl champions, being the team they are, they should still have the expectation to go all the way. I mean, that's the team's mindset's going to have that, and trust me, anything short of that is going to result in, I think, either, I think Brett Veach is going to be shuffling around, a lot of the offense, the skill position players, pretty much no matter what happens, but probably because it's going to fall short. Now, I will say, I still think the AFC, they can make a run through the AFC. I just really feel like whoever they match up with in the NFC Super Bowl, in the NFC side of the Super Bowl, it just feels like one of those teams is going to end up overwhelming them, Niners, Cowboys, Eagles. Like one of those, like the Eagles look like the worst of the three. And, I mean, the Chiefs outplayed them. You can argue they should have beat them. But at the same time, the Eagles did just beat them and showed some reasons that they could do it again. So, yeah, I think I think still the expectation for the team should be, going all the way. But my thing is, I think probably my highest expectation is just to get to the Super Bowl. I could see them stumbling once they get there. But they can still make a run through the AFC. The AFC is that jumbled up.
I think at least getting to the AFC Championship game is kind of where I think it's going. I don't think it's a first round exit. I don't think they're going to miss.
I guess if it's on the road in the AFC Championship, right? Like, I guess that's a fair. It's like, all right, finally it was another team's year. kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's a fair thing to kind of think how to think.
I mean, we're bargaining a little bit here. You know, I don't know what stage that is in the grief process here, but it's one of those situations where they should still win the Super Bowl. They probably won't unless something better changes, but they should still win the division, and they probably will unless something massive changes.
Right. And so that's why, that shouldn't just be the expectation. You know, getting to the playoffs should not be the expectation. This team should still be they're still one of the best teams in the AFC, if not debatably. You know, I think the Ravens have a good argument to be made, but everyone's showing holes that the Chiefs have. So I'm not, it's easy to say, hey, the Chiefs have problems. Like, hey, every team has problems. I do think the Chiefs' problems are pretty dire compared to other teams' problems, compared to, winning a Super Bowl. But again, the AFC is so jumbled up. I really feel like it's the year for the Niners, Cowboys, or Eagles to kind of make it through and take that.
Well, speaking of dire problems, let's get to the wide receiver room. Sonny DeRod from Gmail.
Sonny the Road. He told me that's how to pronounce it. Sonny the Road.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Sonny the Road. Appreciate the question here. A common opinion is that if Justin Watson's your number one receiver, then you have a problem. The question here, though, is why? If he gets open, makes catches, Mahomes trusts him, what's the problem?
No, it's a good question. We talked about this on the pod before, but it really is just that, he is a trustworthy, reliable receiver for that limited time. He's supposed to be in that 3 or 4 receiver spot where he's running, downfield routes as that auxiliary player, maybe not the primary read, but, someone that's pushing the safeties. But hey, if the safety kind of works down, then you're going to have an open play. He is good in limited opportunities, but he's a limited player for a reason. As soon as you see that target dial turn up, the efficiency goes away, right? It's because he will have drop problems over 10 targets in a game. We saw him drop those passes, in the Eagles game. You just can't rely on him that much, And the thing is, he's a downfield receiver that should just only get, it's like the MVS thing. Like MVS only gets 2 or 3 targets a game because he's a downfield kind of a safety pusher. But if it's there, Mahomes is going to throw it. Watson's good at that, but that should really only happen, especially with the way teams defend the Chiefs, like 2, 3, 4 times maximum a game. And so he really, he's not the best receiver at the other stuff. It's really the downfield stuff that he has the connection with. So again, if he has 10, 11 targets, it's because he's doing more than he's should be doing in his role. And that's why he's not a number one receiver. He's more of just a complementary piece.
Yeah. Now, if you said he should be the number one deep threat receiver on this current roster as constructed over MVS, I'm with you.
Right.
I think that's absolutely fair. But yeah, he's got a very specific role, and we've seen when they try to make it more than that, he's not that type of player, which is fine. Is what he is. Town Halls Canada. I'm going to get to this question about the future of the wide receiver room. So we also got a question from KS Chaser. Any good receivers coming up in free agency in the offseason? Town Halls Canada says only Rice and maybe Hardman should return. But hey, even Rice has serious issues carrying the football. First of all, let me address that second part. Rice does not have serious issues carrying the football. Rice is the centerpiece of this wide receiver room this year and should again be next year. I would love to see them find some elite free agent wide receiver to add to the top of that room. I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to build around Rashee Rice and whoever else they bring back from this group. I'm not sure it's going to be McCole Hardman. I'm not sure it's going to be Kadarius Toney. But I think of all of them, Rice is one that I absolutely want to see them build around.
Yeah, I think Rice, though, I think there is going to be a ceiling to, how much he can become a true number one wide receiver. I think they set him up best if he is a really high upside number 2 receiver and they still have somebody that can be kind of that all around, winner in all aspects of the game. Mike Evans is someone that is going to be a free agent this offseason who, I know he's 30 years old, or he was 30 years old this year. Which, hey, isn't that that old, honestly. In today's NFL, with we're seeing guys. Kelsey is 34, I think, right? And we're just starting to see him maybe finally show some signs of age, just some, not totally. But all that to say, yeah, Mike Evans is someone. T. Higgins is going to be tough, right? He's probably going to get franchise tagged and kind of maybe traded. Michael Pittman might be in that same boat, but he is also kind of that number one receiver type that I think can do, all the things that I think Rasheed could develop into that. But I don't think it's fair to just bank on that if you're the Chiefs. I think it'd be nice, stockpile the room. If Rice turns into a number one receiver, boom. All of a sudden it's like, great, we got two guys that are awesome. If Rice is just kind of continues to always be a guy that just, is kind of, like right now, really what he is he's schemed open. We're seeing him kind of get more downfield passes down the sideline, but a lot of what he does is quick passes, quick hitters, quick screens, shallow crossers, kind of just quick decision making, kind of easy stuff. And so I think it'd be nice to see them kind of not just like bank on him, like turning into way more than that. So
yeah,
that's kind of how
that's the reason why I didn't want to give the impression that I don't want to see them upgrade the room. I certainly do.
Oh, yeah.
I just think of that room, I don't think we should be second guessing Rice. I think Rice is
oh yeah, 100%. He's shown something.
Part of that future. Other free agents. I mean, Calvin Ridley would be awesome. I'm guessing that they'll find a way to
That's
not
a good
let
one
him
too.
Hit the market. He could be your number one guy.
I don't know. He really hasn't been. He hasn't really performed that well. They may. He may not be a that high of a. That he may not. He may be a value free agent. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then yeah, I'd certainly support that. And there's a bunch of other guys that are kind of your little slot receiver style players that, I don't know that they're going to invest big in, a Sterling Shepard, I've always liked Laviska Shenault just because I think you can do a lot of fun stuff with him, but he's not going to be your featured receiver. Marquise Brown.
I mean, yeah, someone like Noah Brown, even with Houston this year, has shown. I mean, he's obviously like someone that's a legit receiver. I mean, in my opinion, he's
a downfield guy, right? Like
he's a pretty good volume guy for them too. Stroud has been able to play, throw a lot to him. He's kind of been a reliable guy this year. So yeah, no, the free agent receiver position is definitely one they can attack, and I think they will.
Yeah, Cedric Wilson's another kind of interesting one. We'll see what happens there. They should 100% focus on the receiver room the way they did the offensive line in previous seasons or the defense in last year's draft. This is a unit that needs to be worked over. I think they should add one veteran as high of a tier as they can afford, and still add one in the first 3 rounds of the draft, and continue to look at future replacements. So if I'm the Chiefs, 2 of my first 3 draft picks are probably receiver and tight end.
Yeah, no, I think you will see that focus point for sure. But let's get to Shoe Brew at Shoemaker David's question on Twitter. Everyone wants to blame the refs and receivers, which we've talked about a lot. Thinking about the past games, I feel like the O-line has been the big part of the issue, forcing Mahomes to throw bad passes, taking horrible penalties at worst times, not finishing in the red zone. What say you? And I will take lead on this answer because, I do think there is something to, Donovan Smith, Jawan Taylor, both getting penalties at bad times. Even the interior offensive linemen getting holds at wrong times. This week, there was a play early where Mahomes got sacked on a 4-man rush, and he just did not have time to look at anything because Creed and Trey kind of gave way on a stunt. Not something you see terribly often from them, but it has been a little bit more of a theme this year. So, I do think the O-line should take some responsibility, but just for the record, I really don't think it's enough to say, that's a part of the reason, they're not as good as they have been in the past. I think this offensive line, and we didn't talk enough about Wanya Morris. Probably you put him in your winners, and we have another question about him here. But yeah, I don't know. From your perspective, do you feel like the offensive line is doing its thing, doing enough?
Yeah, they can continue to get better, and I think Wanya Morris is going to be part of that. I think Donovan Smith, has been fine, but there's certainly been too many penalties and too many plays where he just runs into Mahomes or the running back and they bounce off of him. That stuff was pretty frustrating. Wanya Morris is bringing a different level of athleticism, especially to the run game. And I think you'll see a lot of highlight reel blocks from him in the run game, and they should lean on that and lean on the rest of the line and have a good running game going forward. You know, I'm not too worried about Jawan Taylor. I think he's obviously gotten marked for penalties, and he's somebody that they're paying extra close attention to. But you know, he's been a pretty good pass blocker overall. Not the best run blocker, but not a liability either. So I would say they're not a top 2 run, offensive line like we had maybe hoped that they could be, but they're still top 10 probably.
Yeah, because the run game is still something that the offensive line is like the reason the run game has been efficient, has been, good. And, I think the pass protection for the most part has given Mahomes as much time as he's had in the past. I think a lot of times, sometimes you see him run out of the pocket or sack because he's just uncomfortable looking at what's downfield and kind of it just crumbles because of that.
It all comes back to the receivers, man.
It does. It really does, Stags. Like, seriously, it's crazy.
Thomas Ramirez, which rookie looked better versus the Bills, Wanya Morris or Chamari Connor? I thought both were solid. I loved to see Connor get in there. A lot of people were kind of speculating whenever the Chiefs were down a safety and Justin Reed got banged up. I was like, hey, kind of excited to see Chamari Connor get in there, and I thought he played really well. So I think both of those guys give you some hope for the future.
Oh, yeah. And to get into Jake Wilson's question, it leads perfectly into it. At Jake for now, our guy, which of the Chiefs rookies are playing well enough to be trusted in starting roles next season? And so, just to start with Wanya, he's the 3rd round pick from this year. Only 4 rookies really that have played that we've seen from this year. But Wanya, I definitely think I've seen enough that I'm just, I'm comfortable saying I want him to be our left tackle next year in terms of I'm excited to develop somebody, see if they can do it. And I think, he started with a good foundation, man. I think if you ask a lot of the draft people, the thing with him was always just he's an inconsistent player. Like, he has the length, he has the size, he has the footwork at times, but then it's times where it just looks like a mess. And so I think if Andy Heck just makes him consistent, I'm excited to see, them build, develop a left tackle. So I think starting off with him, I think he has played well enough to be trusted at the left tackle position next year. Who else? Do you agree with that, first of all? And then what else have you seen from the other rookies?
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that I think Chamari Connor's got a future in that secondary. We were looking at, hey, what moves should they make in the offseason? Which, by the way, just big picture, I don't love that we're talking about the offseason already. That's a bad sign. But since we are, I could see them moving on from MVS. I can see them moving on from Justin Reed and playing Chamari Connor more as part of this young secondary, just continuing that evolution. I'd be perfectly happy with that. I think Wanya Morris has at least earned himself a really extended tryout at left tackle before they make any other moves. And then I think, Felix Anudike-Uzomah is one that we have not seen much of.
Yeah.
For probably a couple of reasons. One being, hey, they've got other guys there, right? So the pass rush has been pretty good without him. So this would be a longer development cycle for him, but he should get some opportunities next year. And I think, does it matter whether he's a starter? I don't care if he's a starter. I just care, is he part of the rotation and is he productive next year? And I think he should be.
Yeah, because I think, projecting, looking at the projection, Karlaftis obviously will be a starter. Well, Menahu is under contract next year. There's not really any reason for them to get out of that. I would think he's here. And so he'll probably be the starter, like you just said, with quotes, right? Karlaftis and Omenahu. But yeah, I think, Felix, I've said it from the beginning that I really feel like Felix just needs he was a true junior coming out. He was a very young player, young prospect, raw prospect, even getting to K-State. He was a very, he was like I can't even remember the weight number, but he was a very skinny defensive lineman getting to K-State. He had to really develop, and I still think there's a lot more to go with that. So you may not see the ceiling for Felix until closer to the end of his rookie deal. And so next year, you just want to see him be more contributor in the pass rush game, which, I think we can project that, especially if Dana's not back. They're just going to need someone to step up more in the pass rush. But yeah, I think there is a chance we still don't see him take, as many snaps as Karlaftis and kind of be that dependable on the edge guy next year. So I think he will be more of a third defensive end, kind of a, the first guy off the bench kind of player.
Yeah, and there could be others from this class that end up being on the roster and part of the equation. BJ Thompson's still out there. Keandre Colburn is back. I mean, who knows? Nick Jones even could make the roster as a special teamer and be part of the equation. Generic Prince obviously could still be part of the equation. He hasn't yet really gotten his opportunity, as an undrafted free agent. So I think there's a chance that you've got a handful of contributors next year, whether they're officially starters or not. To me, the only ones that are officially going to be starters are Rice and potentially Wanya Morris. Everybody else is going to be part of the mix, but I still think it's got a chance to be a really good class.
Yeah. Again, I've thought this class really did need a few years at the very least. 2 years just to, Rice is someone I thought might just need time just to get in the offense. And I think he's really just been forced into the offense a little bit. I think if it was ideal, he wouldn't have such a high, a big role yet. But he's just the rest of the receivers have kind of pushed him to the top. The cream rises to the top, as they say. So, yeah. I think I'm with you, Rice and Morris, and then with Connor, I do think there's a chance the Chiefs, stick with the continuity at the safety position. Justin Reed has played better this year overall. Spags, they kept Tyron through the whole deal he had. Spags really depends on his safety position in a lot of ways. And so I think there is a chance that they just roll with the deep safety group next year too. And Connor's that third guy instead of the fourth guy like he is now. And he's more of the Mike Edwards role where he's the third safety in dime sets. But I also could see Connor just forcing his way because he makes plays, man. And Spags it's gonna be hard pressed to, keep him off the field.
Yeah, and he'll always have a home on special teams, but he's making enough plays potentially in the future to force his way in on defense as well. All right, well, I'll tell you what, let's look ahead at the more immediate future and talk a little bit about Chiefs Patriots coming up. What are your initial takes from that game?
Well, the Patriots have not been an exciting football team to follow or research this year. They've had debatably, some of the worst quarterback play in the league. Mac Jones played himself out of the position, and it was kind of crazy. I mean, they benched him one game, brought him back the next game, and then he benched him midway through the game. And then it was like 3 times until they finally handed the keys over to Bailey Zappi. And what do you know? He wins. He puts up 3 touchdowns in the first half last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh, which was pretty crazy. Was it his first start? I was looking. No, it was his second start of the year. Second time he started. And so we're probably going to see Zappi this time. They obviously are going to depend on the run game. Ramondre Stevenson's a decent running back. But yeah, I think what you're going to see is Spags try to overwhelm, play to the line of scrimmage, stop the run early, and then just force them to make plays in the pass game with Juju Smith-Schuster, with Devontae Parker, with, these guys, Hunter Henry at tight end, they just really don't have a lot of guys. Pop Douglas is a receiver, a rookie for them.
Who's been crazy impressive? Well, okay. Who was crazy impressive in this one game? Ezekiel Elliott's back.
That's true. Zeke has showed some juice with them for sure.
Zeke had 68 yards rushing plus 72 yards receiving and a touchdown in this their game last week against the Steelers. Of course, Ramondre Stevenson was out, and so they were down a man in the rushing. He's the only running back that got a carry in that game against the Steelers. So Zeke is somebody to watch out for. Juju had a nice game this last week, 4 catches, 90 yards.
Yeah,
37-yard catch and run. I mean, he may not be 100% done, but there's an awful lot of folks on this squad that most Chiefs fans are going to look at and say, I've never heard of that person, and the quarterback being one of those. This is not a team at 3-10 that the Chiefs should have trouble with.
Well,
but should is the key word there.
Yeah, that's the thing. Their defense has played better in recent games. You know, they gave up 31 to Miami in late October and haven't given up more than 20 since. You know, they shut out LA, or no, sorry, excuse me. They gave up 6 points to LA. They were shut out against LA, the Chargers, but they did only give up 6 points to the Chargers offense, which, you know, hasn't been its usual self this year. Held the Colts to only 10 points, you know, back in November, which, you know, the Colts, you know, they've had an offense this year that's put up points at times. So the Patriots defense is definitely one that's bounced back since the early season, kind of looking rough, but I don't know. They really haven't faced an offense with any sort of explosive firepower since then. And hey, I mean, the Chiefs haven't shown much explosive firepower, especially Pacheco,
Right.
especially if Pacheco, you know, is not back, which that'll kind of be the key thing here. Cause you know, I think we can end on that note, Stags, but like, I don't know your thoughts, but like once Pacheco was out before this last game, like it was amazing how it changed my opinion on the game. I've never thought that way about a running back with this offense, but I think that just tells you how much this team needs just some sort of spark plug, and Pacheco brings it. And when he's not there, it can be noticeable.
Yeah, he's the energy guy. He really does make a big difference. So yeah, hopefully he's back, and Drew Tranquil's back on defense, and they're able to put together more of a complete performance, and just at this point, keeping themselves out of a situation where they have to have that game-winning drive at the end. That, you know, that's going to be their best path to success right now until some things change. They're just going to need to keep themselves in a close, not in such a close game, get a lead, you know, and make it a 2-score game, you know, and early on, so that it doesn't end up in this situation where they put themselves in a hole. They're down 14-0 to start the game, and then it comes down to they come back and make it close, and then you've got one chance to win it at the end, just because that's not been the recipe for success as of late. So I'd sure like to see them control this game a little bit more, put some points on the board early, not get into a big hole, and then not have to rely on that last-minute drive.
Yep. Yeah. I think if Pacheco's back, I think you're going to get a healthy dose of him. Although, you know, again, I mean, Clyde and McKinnon did have a decent, you know, a strong showing this last week. So, you know, I think either way, you're going to see the run game play a factor, and the Chiefs are going to try to get to back to Arrowhead for Christmas Day for the Raiders game, you know, healthy and, you know, off a win. So, I mean, you know, it's these last few games, guys. It's going to be just waiting for the playoffs, and I'm ready for it to happen. I'm ready for the playoffs to start and for the Chiefs to show, you know, to prove me wrong. I mean, I'd love to be wrong about the season's outlook, Stags, but
let's see how much they've been saving.
We're gonna have to wait a little bit, right? We're gonna have to wait about a month until then.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully Andy Reid and company have something up their sleeves. Definitely tune in to see the results of that game, but also continue to listen with us, the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. Check out all of Ron's work and everybody else's on the site. There's plenty of coverage of the Chiefs from every day of the week. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to listen with us today, and we'll talk to you next week, hopefully on a little bit brighter note.